Shalom Israel. Before I start, I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Haraka Kadash, double honors to the elders and apostles in Israel, the rule and teach well, to the Akim, and the Iwas and Buyers, and those pushing videos in truth and sincerity, to the brothers and sisters in the truth. Now you got this issue going on between China and the Philippines that I just want to go over quickly. This is an article. It says, news alert, Philippines accuse China of swarming presence. I just want to play some of this video here. Because we know when we read the scriptures, it speaks about world war. A lot of our people don't believe, but it's something which, we have to expect. And there's signs which, if you know what you're looking for, you can see that these things are looming. And these are the early stages of these things. So I just want to go through these videos here quickly.
Let's begin with the news alert coming in from the Philippines. In a retaliatory move, the Philippine military is sending light fighter aircraft to fly over hundreds of Chinese vessels stationed in the disputed waters of South China Sea. The Philippines Defense Minister made the announcement as he repeated his demand that the flotilla be withdrawn immediately. The international concern is going over what the Philippines has described as a quote-unquote swarming and threatening presence of more than 200 Chinese vessels. The Manila believes that these vessels are manned by maritime militia. The boats were moored at the Whitsun Reef within Manila's 200-mile exclusive economic zone. The Philippine military aircraft are being sent daily to monitor the situation. The defense minister has said that the military will also beef up its naval presence in the South China Sea to conduct sovereignty patrols and protect Filipino fishermen. The Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte had reaffirmed to China's ambassador Huang Shilian the Philippines had won a landmark arbitration case in 2016 which made clear its sovereign entitlements amid the rival claims made by China. Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, China, and Vietnam have competing territorial claims in the South China Sea, through which at least $3.4 trillion of annual trade passes.
Now, when you look at the Philippines compared to China, right, they're very small. So the China can deal with them quite easily if that was the case. But just want to go over this video here quickly just to show the difference
the reason
between
I love using StreamYard. Well, that's
Slovakia, the difference between China and the Philippines. So China comes up third in the power ranks. That would most likely be the US, Russia, and then China. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this, but the point of this video, you can see that China greatly outmanned the Philippines, but yet still, they're looking to come up against them. And one of the reasons being where the Philippines got backing them.
U.S. backs Philippines. Biden sends warships to destroy Beijing in South China Sea.
So you got the US that's actually backing the Philippines. So although they may be outmanned by China, they've actually got the #1 superpower behind them. I just want to play a little bit of this video here.
U.S. backs Philippines. Biden sends warships to destroy Beijing in South China Sea.
And these are all quite recent. First one I played was the 28th of March. Let me see what this one is. This was last year, October, coming up to a year. And this video here is the 25th of March. So, you know, dealing with the issues, they're quite recent.
The United States said it is backing the Philippines in a new standoff with Beijing in the disputed South China Sea, where Manila has asked a Chinese fishing flotilla to leave a reef. China ignored the call, insisting it owns the offshore territory. The U.S. Embassy said it shared the concerns of the Philippines and accused China of using maritime militia to intimidate, provoke, and threaten other nations, which undermines peace and security in the region. The U.S. stand with the Philippines, U.S. oldest treaty ally in Asia. The U.S.
Imagine if you turned this. We've got these stupid ads.
U.S. Embassy in Manila said in a statement. Philippine Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana on Sunday demanded about 200 Chinese vessels he said were militia boats leave the Whitsun Reef, a shallow coral region about 175 nautical miles or 324 km west of Bataraza town in the western Philippine province of Palawan. Philippine officials said the reef, which they call Julian Felipe, is well within the country's internationally recognized exclusive economic zone, over which the Philippines enjoys the exclusive right to exploit or conserve any resources. The Philippine Coast Guard spotted about 220 Chinese vessels moored at the reef, which Beijing and Vietnam also claim. On Monday, a surveillance aircraft spotted 183 Chinese vessels still at the reef, said Philippine Military Chief Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobahana, who released aerial pictures of the Chinese vessels in one of the most hotly contested regions in the strategic waterway. The Philippines has filed a diplomatic protest over the Chinese presence, Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said. China insisted it owns the reef, which it calls Niue Jiao, and said the Chinese vessels converged in the area to avoid rough waters.
Quite all of this anyway is that tension is building between these nations. And like I was saying, the Philippines, even though they're outmanned by the US, Slovakia by China, they've got the US backing them. And recently, the US, they had sit down with China, which didn't go too well. Now, this article here is March 19th. It says US and China start Alaska meeting with blunt words. Now, I'll just read a little bit of this. It says the first high-level US-China meeting during President Joe Biden's presidency kicked off in Anchorage, Alaska on Thursday, with both sides trading barbs from the outset. The icy venue is far from the only indicator that relations between the world's two largest economies are unlikely to fall anytime soon. It says with stern expressions, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Chinese Politburo member Yang Jiechi, and Foreign Minister Wang Yi made their opening statements peppered with unusually blunt words. So the tension is quite high between the US and China. And now you got they're back in the Philippines. But these things are, signs for us to know that we're almost out of there. These are things that are to be expected. This is on Joel chapter 3, verse 9. It says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears, let the weak say, I am strong. And when you look at Philippines, the comparisons that we showed, them against China, they're quite weak, but then they're being backed by the Americans. Slovakia. It says, assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Hither cause thy might wants to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be weakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And that's what the Most High is looking to do, to bring judgment upon these nations. And there's a reason why he's looking to bring judgment. Joel 3:1 says, for behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and we plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. So the Most High is looking to bring these nations into judgment, and the way he's going to be doing that is making them war amongst themselves. This is Isaiah 13:4. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. So all these things that are happening is the Most High putting in the spirit of these nations to come together for war. And that's what we have to expect. A third world war. The scripture speaks of these things, and we can see, the building blocks falling into place. Second Esdras, and this is just a short little video I wanted to do just to touch on these things. Second Esdras 13 and 33 and 32. And the time shall be when these things shall come to pass, and the sign shall happen which I showed thee before. Then shall my son be declared, whom thou sawest as a man ascending. And when all the people hear his voice, every man shall in their own land leave the battle they have one against another, because the Most High is going to have these nations fighting against each other, when Yahushua returns. And an innumerable multitude shall be gathered together, as thou sawest them, willing to come and to overthrow him by fighting. Yeah, they're going to be fighting amongst each other when Yahushua returns, but then they will leave off that battle and try and fight Yahushua. Second Esdras 13:5. And after this I beheld, and lo, there was gathered together a multitude of men out of number from the four winds of the heaven to subdue the man that came out of the sea. But I beheld, and lo, he had graved himself a great mountain and flew up upon it. So when Yahushua returns, we know he's coming back with a multitude of angels and a big fathership. We'll put it that way. It says, but I would have seen the region or place whereat the hill was graven, and I could not. This is how big this ship is. And you see in the movies them that they make, War of the Worlds and other such films, where you got this big ship with all the little ones coming out of it. And after this I beheld, and they know this from the scriptures. That's where they get these ideas for these movies from, through the scriptures. But I would have seen the region or place whereat the hill was graven, and I could not. And after this I beheld, and lo, all they which were gathered together to subdue him were sore afraid, and yes, does fight. So even though, they're fighting amongst themselves, they stop fighting when they see Yahushua and the angels come. They're afraid to fight, but they're still fighting, because at the end of the day, they don't want to lose what they have. That's why they're fighting, really, trying to preserve what they actually have. And lo, as he saw the violence of the multitude that came, he neither lifted up his hand, nor sword, nor any instrument of war. But only I saw that he sent out his mouth as it had been a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath. Out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempests. They were all mixed together, the blast of fire, the flaming breath, and the great tempest, and fell with violence upon the multitude which was prepared to fight, and burnt them up every one, so that upon a sudden, of all an innumerable multitude, nothing was to be perceived, but only dust and smell of smoke. When I saw this, I was afraid. So the battle that's to come, when Yahushua returns, it's a hands down battle. These nations won't be able to do nothing against him. Matthew 24:6 says, and ye shall hear wars and rumors of wars. And this is what we're hearing, wars and rumors of wars. We've got the Philippines bringing out their warships, against the Chinese. and they're backed by the Americans. Says, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. Yeah, when we see these things, we shouldn't be troubled. The scripture lets us know that wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times. Yeah, because we know what's going to happen. So we, we're prepared for what's coming. All these, like our people, they're looking for things to go back to normal, for there to be peace and safety, which they're not going to get. It says, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So for us to get into the kingdom, these things must come to pass. It says, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. These things are happening around the world. If you take time to look and research what's happening around the world, you see that these things are happening. So all these are the beginnings of sorrows. Yeah. So it's soon time for us to be out of here. So Luke 21:28. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. So Yashar Allah, we're almost out of here, man. Keep the faith strong. Do your best to fear the Most High and keep His commandments to the best of your abilities. Rehearse the righteous acts. As the scripture says, when these things start to come to pass, lift up your head because our redemption draweth nigh. So with that, I'm going to close out and give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Bahar, Rakar Kadash, Kwam Nasha Allah.